What a crazy week this has been. And it's just bizarre to talk about, to be honest. And I will say that I am rather solemn for good reason today. And I want to talk about The Ultimate Warrior right now. I wasn't sure about doing this video because, I'll throw it out there, I was never a huge Ultimate Warrior fan. And I do want to say that this just kind of shocks me, to be completely honest. So, I want to go into a couple of things. Now, I wanted to make sure that I had this right, so I have it right in front of me. So I want to talk about a couple of things real quick. Now, if I trip over my words, it happens, I'm sorry, but I'll try not to as best I can. Now, I do want to mention that we just came off WrestleMania week, and more importantly, WrestleMania weekend, where we had the Hall of Fame ceremony, WrestleMania, and the Raw after WrestleMania. So, these were 3 opportunities for the public to view The Ultimate Warrior. And I know there are a lot of things that could be said, and have been said, but this was basically a fitting way to say goodbye to a character that a lot of us out there have grown up on. And a superstar that you didn't know what he was saying from time to time. But it was something that we knew was entertaining and something that we knew was kind of cool, to be totally honest. You never knew exactly what he was talking about, but after he was finished, it was kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. What did he just say? Well, doesn't matter because it was still awesome. And these promos were like a million miles a minute, and they were insane to say the least. Talking about rocket fuel and all sorts of different bizarre things. But it always had a point, even though you never knew exactly where it was going to go. And at the end you were feeling 2 emotions. Huh? And that was awesome. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the promos of The Ultimate Warrior. I will say that there was a huge, and I do mean a huge gap, in Ultimate Warrior's wrestling career. And basically, he had his final match in 1998. There was a promotion in Barcelona called New Wrestling Evolution. And he had a match against Orlando Jordan for their championship. And this was supposed to be like a quick Ultimate Warrior match. You know, the normal seed thing. Clotheslines, press slam, big splash. Done. No. Warrior actually wrestled this match. And it actually got a lot of flack when a lot of people were talking about the fact that they wanted an Ultimate Warrior match and they got a wrestling match. So, that was the last time he would be in a squared circle as a competitor. And he would not be seen again in the public eye until July 15th of last year, when it was officially announced that he was going to be DLC for WWE 2K14 as a pre-order bonus. And of course, because of the road to WrestleMania, all the storylines basically doing every single WrestleMania from beginning all the way to the end, to last year's WrestleMania, of course it stopped 2012 for good reason. Basically, what ended up happening was he was a character, and his portrayal was from WrestleMania 6, the historic battle between him and Hulk Hogan, live from the Sky Dome in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And this match actually, as I speak, I believe is being played on the WWE Network as a tribute to Warrior. And it's one of my favorite Warrior matches, because it actually was a wrestling match. And it wasn't an elongated squash. It wasn't just like over like that. No, it was a long match and was actually really good. Warrior, of course, was the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and Hogan was the World Heavyweight Champion. And, of course, Warrior pinned Hogan to win the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. And throughout the years, I'll be honest, I always rooted against the Ultimate Warrior. I did. I always rooted against the babyface. That's just how I am. I grew up as a kid that liked the heels. That's just me. Mr. Perfect, obviously my favorite wrestler of all time. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. The model, Rick Martel. This was who I cheered for back in the day. There was that really odd time in 1990 when I was a big mark for Tugboat. Yeah, not easy to admit to people. But, there you go. So the Warrior had some epic battles with another superstar that I have always been a huge fan of, and that's Ravishing Rick Rude. And I'm sure there's a lot of matches going on right as we speak, somewhere out there in parts unknown. These matches were awesome, and I always enjoyed them, and I always enjoyed Warrior's interaction with DiBiase, and I enjoyed matches with Rick Martel. I remember a really good match with him and Rick Martel on Saturday Night's Main Event. And one of the super shows, one of the Japan WWF super shows, where the Warrior faced off against Ted DiBiase. I really enjoyed that match as well. So I wasn't really a fan of the Warrior, but I did understand why he existed, and it was kind of cool, to be totally honest. I wasn't a fan, but I wasn't against him. Like, not completely. I rooted against him, but I never was against the man himself. And of course, humble beginnings with the Blade Runners, outside of Power Team USA, trained by Rick Bassman, teaming up with Sting back in the day, and just like the Dingo Warrior, and the feud with Randy Savage, again, that I'm pretty sure is going on right as we speak. This stuff was just things that my childhood was filled with. And I always remember the really awesome thing that I still can't watch this day because of my extreme fear of snakes, where the Ultimate Warrior was trying to find out how to defeat The Undertaker. So he would go to Jake the Snake Roberts, and Jake was trying to get him to do really weird things to try to get into the Ultimate Warrior's head, just where The Undertaker's headspace was. Just to go to that dark, dark place that you don't want to go to, and because most people can't get out of it once they get there. And that dark place literally was a room filled with snakes. Which, of course, Jake uttered the line, "Never trust a snake." And I remember that. I remember the stuff with Papa Shango, where he showed up and he had, like, black ink dripping down his face. I remember that. I mean, these are weird things to remember, I'm aware of, but still, things I remembered. The stuff in WCW. The really awkward thing in WCW. Like, to also talk about what happened on Raw a couple weeks ago. When John Cena was standing at the sink, and all of a sudden he looked down, he looked up, and he looked back down, and he had a sheet mask staring at him. And then when he looked back up, the sheet mask was gone. It was just kind of like reminiscent of in WCW, where Hulk Hogan looked around, and he saw the Ultimate Warrior's face, and when he turned back around, he wasn't there. And no one could see him but Hogan. So Hogan was having, like, delusions at this point. Now, I'll grant you that the match that Hogan and Warrior had in WCW was not even holding a candle to their match at WrestleMania 6. But, that being said, there was still a reason that it happened. Now, of course, the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD aside, and a lot of people buried the Ultimate Warrior on that DVD, and Warrior himself, during his Hall of Fame speech, basically said how hurt he was by the fact that people he thought were friends could throw him under the bus that easily. And luckily, WWE decided to put out a Warrior DVD, a retrospective DVD, that's actually out now, so you can check that out. And I'm pretty sure it's out now. If not, it's going to be out next week. Like I said, I'm trying not to do things with, I'm trying not to read things like I normally do in these, because I'm trying to do this a little bit more from the heart. I I will say right now that, like I said, if it comes down to anything, the feuds with Ravishing Rick Rude and Randy Savage, they were my absolute favorites when it comes to feuding, obviously. And there was a lot of interesting things over the Warrior's career. And the fact that Jim Hellwig believed in Warrior so much that he legally changed his name to Warrior. I mean, that takes dedication right there. And a lot of people say, he's crazy for doing that. No, he believed exactly what he was preaching to everyone. Not necessarily something that people could really understand, but something that people can kind of, well, see where he's coming from, in a sense. So, like I said, I mean, there were the fakes. There was the One Warrior Nation indie wrestler. Of course, there was the Renegade. And there was all sorts of different things that they've done throughout the years. The stuff with Sergeant Slaughter was great. And you have some really good stuff that was done with Demolition. And the first time I remember seeing, like, man fighting valet was obviously Warrior stuff with Sherry Martel when Sherry was in the corner of Randy Savage. I remember seeing a match where she got dragged through the Blue Bard steel cage by Ultimate Warrior, and that was really awesome to see back then, because you just didn't see that stuff back then. I'm not advocating violence against women. This is coming from Sir Owen Disney. He choked Tracy Smothers' daughter right in front of him with his tie. Right after Daniel Bryan got fired, by the way. But I will say right now that it was just interesting to see. It was something you just didn't see every day. Excuse me. Like the matches with Andre the Giant. And his never-ending feud with Bobby the Brain Heenan, where he put Heenan in the Weasel suit. Just like, this is like gold. Warrior's had a really storied career in the wrestling business. But that wasn't all that he was about. I mean, basically, he was a motivational speaker. He quit wrestling in 1999, and he legitimately became a motivational speaker. And he got into a lot of flack for some of his political views. And, of course, he did a comic book. He did his own comic book with himself as the main character. Warrior, I actually have the first edition of that. I don't know where it is, but I still have it to this day. And this was a time that he kind of burned a lot of bridges in the wrestling industry. And we're never going to know anything until more is released, obviously. But it was nice to know, at least for the weekend, everything was a little more smoothed over. Warrior's letting bygones be bygones about everything. He had an amazing Hall of Fame speech. And he said everything he needed to say. Almost like he knew his time on this earth was at a limited time, and he knew he had to get everything off his chest one last time to say everything he needed to say to the people that needed to hear it. He was basically trying to get retribution for his entire life and all the mistakes that were made. Not necessarily all his fault, but things that were made in his name, obviously. And this had nothing to do with the wrestling business at all. It's just there was personal vendettas that Warrior had with different people. And one by one, he buried the hatchet with every single one of them. Like he knew something that no one else did. Now, he has a family to think about. And he just signed an ambassador contract with WWE, which thus will probably help his family out for years to come. Financially speaking, of course. And like I said, he buried the hatchet with Vince McMahon. He buried the hatchet with all of the WWE superstars that he's had dealings with over the past. And he agreed to come back. At the grandest stage of them all, the 30th WrestleMania, to give the fans some closure. And to give himself some closure, to be totally honest. I would say that with the Hall of Fame speech, he was saying goodbye to everyone. But he had a few things left to be said, so of course he had to show up on Raw on Monday night. He showed up actually at WrestleMania, and he popped the crowd, of course, because he's the Ultimate Warrior. And then his words on Raw Monday night, just 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Just, they still ring through in my head. And it's really just, it's eerie when you think about exactly the word choice. He said, in his own words, "No WWE talent becomes a legend on their own. Every man's heart one day beats its final beat. His lungs breathe their final breath. And if what that man did in his life makes the blood pulse through the body of others and makes them believe deeper in something larger than life, than its existence, his essence, his spirit will be immortalized. By the storytellers, by the loyalty, by the memory of those who honor him and make the running the man did live forever. You, pointing to the WWE Universe in all different areas of the arena. You are the legend makers of Ultimate Warrior. In the back, I see many potential legends, some of them with warrior spirits. And you will do the same for them. You will decide if they lived with the passion and intensity, so much so that you will tell your stories and you will make them legends as well. I am Ultimate Warrior. You are the Ultimate Warrior fans, and the spirit of the Ultimate Warrior will run forever." Now, knowing what we know now, doesn't it just seem like he was really his last words in front of a live television audience to all his fans all around the world? He was saying goodbye because he knew something. And life can end in an instant sometimes. Like, you could wake up one day and you could be fit as a fiddle and you could just, bam, the next day, it's all over in an instant. Sometimes that happens. Whether right or wrong, sometimes that stuff happens. And we didn't know anything as wrestling fans about the Ultimate Warrior having any issues. Sure, and I'm sure it's being spoken about right now, but the steroids back in the day, I mean, that's how it worked. In the 90s, that's how you saw a professional wrestler in the 90s, in the WWF. The big bodybuilding physiques. No gym rat in the world can get that kind of a physique without some sort of stimulation as well. I mean, that's how things were. Some wrestlers fell by the wayside. Others gave it up completely and went on to different things. Most of those wrestlers have left us long ago. Some of them are still standing. It's anyone's guess exactly what happened. Now, there's a lot of rumors that have been going around Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media today, like message boards, news boards, all around the internet, basically saying that it was a heart attack, is pretty much what people are saying it is. And, it's anyone's guess exactly what could have caused it. Was it drug-related, steroid-related? We don't know these things. And we won't know these things till we get more concrete evidence, and there's going to be a long time before we get more concrete evidence. But all we know is that after the Warrior entertained us for so many years, and then stepped back away from the wrestling business, and came back at the right time to sow all the wild oats, to basically make sure that his legacy wasn't tarnished, and to also make sure that his true fans that still stuck by him throughout all of his career, whether he was on television or not, were still there. and to give them one last moment to say goodbye. So he's immortalized in video games and action figures, DVDs, videotapes. Yes, I use the word videotape. So there. Those things do exist. Wrestling buddies. I had one. I'll admit it. I mean, the likeness of the Ultimate Warrior will live on forever. It will. And the warrior spirit will live on forever. I mean, you have to understand, in the sake of, there wouldn't be any insane, crazy promos in the wrestling industry unless the Ultimate Warrior did it first. And the face paint, the physique, it's just, it was unmistakable. And it really was. And it will remain unmistakable forever. So like I said, this weekend was about saying goodbye. And paying homage to someone who we all grew up with. As wrestling fans, before I went into the wrestling business, before I started talking about it here on YouTube, I was a wrestling fan. I still am. We all are. Just because we know a little bit more than others doesn't mean we're still not all fans at heart. And whether you know it or not, a certain wrestler, obviously, throughout history, has inspired you to do something. Whether it's go on with your job, or go on with school, and move on to family, it's just like they've inspired you to become better, to better yourself. I mean, we're not just listening to promos, we're not just watching wrestling matches, we're living vicariously through everyone. Some of us can actually do it. Some of us did do it, some of us never will, but still we understand that these are larger than life personalities. And we see that every Monday, and Thursday, and Friday. And usually twice a month on Sundays. The reality here is sometimes these larger than life personalities, things just happen. Like I said, it all can end in an instant. We think about the plans we've made, and obviously Warrior himself had a lot of plans. Maybe we would have got another year run on television, cutting these unintelligible promos and entertaining the crowd so much. Maybe we've got another year. Who knows? We'll never know now. Like I said, it all could end in an instant. And just because you see somebody one day doesn't mean they could necessarily be here the next. And that's exactly what happened. And it's a travesty, it really is. And it's 54 years old. That is young nowadays. It really is. But his heart just gave out. There's no way of knowing the reason why. You can speculate all you want, but fact remains that the Ultimate Warrior as a character, whether we liked him or not, entertained us at one point, mesmerized us at one point, confused us at one point, of course, and got us to understand why we are wrestling fans above all at one point. Now, if I'm rambling, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to come from the heart here. But I'm sure a lot of you out there share my feelings about the situation and know that anytime, thanks to the WWE Network, you could just fire up an Ultimate Warrior match, go to YouTube, find an Ultimate Warrior promo, pull out your PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 and play as the Ultimate Warrior and live vicariously through him. Warrior finally had his peace with the wrestling business this past weekend. He said goodbye to everyone. And we finally had our closure with the Ultimate Warrior character before he was taken from us off this earth. And that's a great thing to know that we at least had these final moments, these final events to remember just how entertaining the Ultimate Warrior can be and will remain forever. So, as wrestling fans, whether you're in the wrestling business, we're in the wrestling business, never have been in the wrestling business, or you just watch wrestling one day and we're like, hey, this is cool. We all know that whether it's the Ultimate Warrior was somebody you liked, or whether we're talking down the road about others that left us way too soon, which the list goes on, like for miles upon miles. And it's not right. But the business takes its toll on people. Warrior got out for a long time, but it's just sometimes it just catches up to us. And Father Time just decides to say, you're done. And that's what happened. So we shed tears and we reminisce, and that's what we do. And that's all we can do at this point. So like I said, think about those promos. Think about WrestleMania 6. Think about your favorite Ultimate Warrior moment. And if you'd like to share your favorite Ultimate Warrior moment, leave me a comment. Send me an email. We can talk about the Ultimate Warrior. That's awesome. I'd have no issue with that. You want to tweet me? It's simple. It's at Sir Owen Disney. I'm very easy to find. We can talk Warrior all day long. And I'm sure we will for a long time. Because the memory of the Ultimate Warrior will last forever. That being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. And my heart is with the family of Warrior at this time. And rest in peace, Ultimate Warrior. You will be missed. That's all I got to say about that.